Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing ankle-deep in cold mud before a medieval castle gate with winter dusk pressing down like a damp wool blanket. The stone walls rise above you dark with rain, their cracks shining where torchlight catches the wet. Smoke hangs in the rafters of the gatehouse ahead. Horse breath ghosts through the air, and somewhere beyond the river mist, a bell sounds slow and tired, as if even the monastery would rather be asleep. Your boots are heavy, your cloak smells of wet wool, and a bit of straw clings to your sleeve from the last miserable inn where medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, not with the cold, the fleas, the suspicious pottage, and everyone treating clean socks like a luxury for kings. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from, and what the local time is beside your own window tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your pack higher on your shoulder, and follow the cart ruts toward the castle's outer gate, where two torches lean in iron brackets and gutter in the wind. The road behind you has been a long brown ribbon of thawing frost, crooked hedges and leafless trees, with crows sitting in the branches like black buttons stitched to the sky. A small dog has followed you since the last village, all ribs and confidence trotting several paces behind, as though he has business at the castle too. No one can quite agree whether dogs see spirits better than people do, but every carter you passed seemed willing to believe it, especially after sunset when belief costs nothing and fear is already awake. The castle is not grand in the clean shining way of painted romances. It is grand in the older, colder way: thick walls, narrow slits of windows, a ditch half filled with black water, and a gatehouse built to make visitors feel like mice approaching a cupboard. Above the arch, the Lord's arms have been carved into the stone, though wind and rain have gnawed the beast on the shield, until it could be a lion, a hound, or a very offended sheep. A watchman peers down from the wall walk, his fur-lined cap pulled low, his nose red from the weather. He asks your name, your errand, and whether you carry anything that might trouble the peace of the household. You think of the little eating knife at your belt, the heel of coarse bread in your pouch, and the pilgrim token you bought for luck from a woman who may or may not have been selling the same luck to everyone. You answer gently because castle gates are not places for cleverness. The portcullis rises with a wooden groan. It does not leap upward like in a tale. It complains shivers and inches into the darkness above, shedding dust and a few flakes of old straw. You duck beneath it and step into the gate passage where the air changes at once. Outside, the wind has space to wander. Inside, it slides along the stone in thin, sneaky currents, touching your neck, your fingers, the damp hem of your cloak. The ceiling is low, blackened by years of torch smoke. The flagstones are uneven underfoot, and each hollow tap of your boots seems to travel too far, as if the walls are passing the sound along among themselves. A porter waits near an oak door banded with iron. He is broad, grey-bearded, and wrapped in a patched cloak that smells faintly of ale smoke and stable hay. A ring of iron keys hangs from his belt, each one large enough to make you grateful. You're not responsible for losing it. He looks you over with the mild disappointment medieval officials reserve for all travellers, then waves you onward. You came late, he says, not angrily, only as one might mention that rain is wet. Road bad. You nod and he snorts softly. Roads are always bad. That is how you know you're still in this world. The dog slips in behind you before the gate drops again. The porter sees him, considers objecting, then seems to decide that arguing with a dog at dusk is beneath his station. He pushes open the inner door and warm air leaks out rich with smoke, boiled onions, damp rushes, and the distant promise of supper. It is not exactly pleasant, but after the road it feels almost holy. You pass into the lower yard. The castle closes around you in layers, stables to one side, their doors glowing with lantern light. A brew house with steam breathing from its roof vent. A well in the middle of the yard, its rope stiff with frost. And beyond it all the keep rising square and dark, its upper windows no more than yellow slits. Servants cross the yard with baskets and buckets, heads lowered against the cold. Somewhere a horse stamps. Somewhere a kitchen boy curses softly after dropping a bundle of firewood, then glances around as if saints might fine him for language. Near the chapel door, a monk in a dark habit stands very still, watching the yard with his hands tucked into his sleeves. His face is half hidden by his hood. You cannot tell whether he's praying, listening, or simply avoiding work with impressive holiness. The porter leads you under a covered passage where old shields hang on pegs, and a broken cartwheel leans against the wall waiting for repair that may come tomorrow or next Lent, whichever arrives first. He asks if you have business with the steward, the chaplain, or the mason. The last word catches your attention. The mason you ask. "Aye," he says, lowering his voice, though no one stands close enough to hear. "Master Odo has been tapping the inner walls all afternoon. Says some stones ring wrong. The wind moves through the passage and the torch beside you bends nearly flat before straightening again. Ring wrong, you say?" The porter looks toward the keep. His keys sway at his hip, making a small iron whisper. Some walls keep quiet, some do not. This place is old, and old houses swallow things. Shoes, bones, little bottles, charms, scraps of writing. Sometimes worse if the old women are to be believed, and old women usually are once they have warmed their hands and been given ale. He says this without theatrical fear, which somehow makes it less comforting. A loud man telling ghost tales can be ignored. A tired porter stating household facts is more difficult. You follow him across the yard, and as you do, the castle seems to gather itself around your footsteps. The stones are patched in different colours, some pale, some smoke dark, some green at the base, where damp has fed moss through the years. You see narrow places where walls meet at odd angles, blocked arches, a stair that begins boldly and ends in a blank face of masonry. A castle, you begin to understand, is not one building, but many memories stacked and mortared together. Lords die, heirs quarrel. Chapels are extended kitchens, burn towers, crack doors are sealed. Windows are narrowed, and all the while people keep living inside, sweeping rushes over old dirt, hanging herbs from beams, blessing thresholds, losing buttons, hiding coins, and pretending stone forgets. At the foot of the keep stairs, a servant girl passes with a basket of fresh rushes for the hall. Mixed among them you notice lavender rosemary and a few sharp green stems that smell clean and bitter. She tells the porter the old rushes are crawling again, and he tells her to blame Adam Eve or the weather, since all three are past answering back. This is the kind of daily wisdom that seems to hold the medieval world together, practical, resigned, and just slightly unfair to the first humans. As you climb the worn steps, you hear the bell again, farther away now, marking an hour that no one names precisely. Time here belongs to bells, stomachs, candles, and the patience of animals. The sun has almost gone. The last light stains the western clouds dull red, and the first stars appear over the battlements like pinpricks in a monk's unfinished map. Your cold hands ache inside your gloves. Your shoulders loosen as the promise of a hearth grows nearer. But just before you enter the great hall, the porter pauses by a patch of wall beside the doorway. The stones there look no different from the rest, yet someone has marked one with a small chalk cross. He touches it with 2 fingers. "Master Odo says this one sounds hollow," he murmurs. "Might be nothing. Might be some old builder's gap. Might be a thing put in there on purpose." Why would anyone put a thing inside a wall, you ask? The porter looks at you as if you have asked why anyone fears the dark. To keep something out, he says, or to keep something in. Then he opens the door and the heat and noise of the hall roll over you. Firelight voices, wet wool, steaming wooden cups knocking on boards, the thick smell of pottage smoke climbing into soot-black rafters. You step across the threshold with the little dog at your heels carrying the road's cold with you, while behind your back the marked stone waits quietly in the wall. You step into the great hall as though stepping into the belly of some old smoky creature that has been breathing fire and supper for 200 winters. Heat presses softly against your cheeks, not evenly, but in slow waves from the hearth at the far end, where logs crackle beneath an iron hook and a blackened pot hangs over the flames. The air is thick with wood smoke, damp wool, boiled leek's ale, and the green bruised smell of rushes underfoot. After the cold yard, it feels almost luxurious, though luxury here means only that your fingers stop hurting and your boots begin to steam. The little dog trots in behind you, shakes himself once, and immediately looks as if he's always belonged here. He circles 3 times near the hearth, considers a sleeping hound twice his size, and wisely chooses a safer patch beside a bench. Medieval courage, you decide, often looks very much like knowing where not to sit. The porter leaves you near the lower tables and goes to speak with a servant who is carrying a bundle of candles. They are not all beeswax, you notice. The pale sweet-smelling candles near the high table are for the Lord's household and honoured guests, while the smoky tallow dips burn lower down, smelling faintly of fat and impatience. A boy trims one with a small knife, then wipes soot on his tunic as if his clothing has personally volunteered for the task. Somewhere above, hidden in the dark rafters, pigeons mutter softly. Their feathers stir when sparks leap up the chimney, and you wonder how many generations of birds have lived over the heads of men who believed themselves masters of the castle. You're given a place on a bench, a wooden cup of small ale, and a trencher of coarse bread that has clearly seen better mornings. Into its hollow is spooned a ladle of pottage, barley, onions, peas, and a trace of smoked meat that appears and vanishes like a rumour. It is warm, which is nearly enough. You eat slowly, careful not to burn your tongue while the hall settles into its evening rhythm. Servants move like shadows between tables. A steward counts under his breath. A maid pours ale from a clay jug. A grey-haired woman scatters fresh herbs among the floor, rushes pushing aside the older layer with a forked wooden rake. The rushes are not merely decoration. They soften the stone soak-up spills, hide crumbs, and when fortune is less kind, conceal fleas, lice old fish bones, and whatever small disasters fall from medieval meals. Every few days or every few weeks, if the household is lazy poor or simply pretending not to notice, they are raked out and replaced. The woman lifts a damp mat of them near the wall, and a sour smell rises at once, dark and earthy. She wrinkles her nose but does not pause. Beside her, the servant girl you saw in the yard drops armfuls of fresh green stems mixing in lavender, rosemary and meadowsweet. Some swear rosemary keeps sickness from settling in a room, though no one can quite agree whether it frightens away foul air, evil spirits, or only the worst of the smell. You listen as the 2 women murmur together low enough that the steward will not scold them for idleness, but high enough that anyone with ears and curiosity may gather crumbs of the tale. They speak of the chalk mark outside the hall door. They speak of Master Odo the mason and his tapping hammer. They speak of a hollow sound in the wall, not new stone, but old stone, and old stone, as the elder woman says, is always up to something. Last time they opened a place near the north stair, the girl whispers they found a child's spoon. Not a child's, the older woman says. A christening spoon, bent twice, put there for a reason. What reason to confuse whatever meant harm? Evil things like a straight path, they say. Bend the spoon, tangle the road. The girl thinks about this while tossing rushes against the wall. Did it work? The older woman shrugs. We are still here. This answer satisfies everyone in a way that only old superstition can. You take another mouthful of pottage and let the warmth move down into you. Around the hall, people talk in tired, uneven threads. A reeve complains about a tenant who owes hens at Martinmas. A groom insists that one of the stable horses refuses to enter the west stall because it sees something standing there. Two laundresses argue softly over whether a shirt washed on a holy day brings bad luck or merely angry priests. Near the high table, the suspicious monk sits with his hood down, now revealing a narrow face, ink-stained fingers, and the expression of a man who's overheard too much and enjoyed none of it. He glances once toward the marked wall, then he looks away. You notice that the hall itself is full of seams. Behind hanging cloths are older doorways. Behind benches are blocked niches. Around the hearth the stone is patched where smoke and heat have eaten at it. The castle seems less like a fortress than a body with old scars beneath its clothing. New mortar lies over old mortar. New paint flakes from old lime wash. A tapestry of a hunting scene hangs crookedly, and behind its lower edge you glimpse a line of stones that do not quite match the stones around them. A young page, perhaps trying to be useful and failing in the usual page-like manner, carries a basket of broken scraps to the hearth, bits of reed, torn cloth candle ends and splinters from some mended chest. The older rush woman snatches one scrap from the basket before he can burn it. It is a narrow strip of parchment, stiff and brown at the edge. Never burn writing before looking, she mutters. Can you read it? The page asks. No, she says, but that is not the same as it being safe to burn. She turns it over, frowns at marks you cannot see, and tucks it into her sleeve. There's belief in many houses that words, even unread words, hold a little power. A charm written badly may still protect a doorway. A prayer copied by a sleepy clerk may still trouble the devil, assuming the devil has patience for poor handwriting. Even now it is hard to tell whether such scraps were kept out of reverence, caution, or because parchment cost too much to waste. As the old rushes are dragged aside near the lower wall, something pale clicks against the rake. The servant girl freezes. The little dog lifts his head. For a moment all the soft noises of the hall seem to thin around that tiny sound. The older woman bends and picks it up between finger and thumb. Not a skull. Not anything so dramatic. Only a small bone, perhaps, from a goose-wing polished smooth by damp rushes and many feet. The girl exhales, then laughs at herself. Kitchen leaving, says the older woman, though she crosses herself anyway. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether bones found near walls are always accidents. Some are only supper remnants swept where no broom reaches. Some may be charms. Some, the older people say, after enough ale are placed where stone meets earth so that a house remembers it is alive. You cannot tell what this one is. It is laid on the hearth edge where it dries in the orange glow beside a half-burned candle. The hall grows dimmer beyond the firelight. Wind presses at the shutters. The bell you heard outside sounds again, muffled now by stone and smoke. The porter returns, settles near you with his keys in his lap, and nods toward the wall by the doorway. Best sleep light tonight, he says. You look at him. He takes a sip of ale. When old walls are bothered, old tales wake up, and beneath the fresh rushes, under the warmth and chatter and slow breathing of the hall, the stone keeps its silence for now. The porter's warning settles beside you like a second shadow. You keep eating because the pottage is warm and because medieval fear, like medieval rain, is easier to bear with bread in your hand. Around you the hall returns to its soft disorder. Cups scrape. Someone laughs near the lower benches, then remembers the steward and lowers his voice. The little dog sleeps with his nose tucked under his tail, trusting the hearth more than any human oath. Yet your eyes keep drifting toward the door and the marked stone beyond it. The suspicious monk notices from beside a pillar turning a wooden cup between his ink-stained fingers. On the table before him lies a wax tablet and stylus, though he writes nothing. Some swear that men who spend too long copying saints' lives begin to see hidden meanings in cracks, smoke and spilled ale. Looking at him now, you can almost believe it. At last a servant comes for you, a square-shouldered man with sleeves rolled despite the cold. Master Odo wants another pair of eyes, he says. You rise and take your cup with you until the old rush woman clicks her tongue. Cups, it seems, do not wander from tables. You set it down like a penitent returning stolen treasure. The porter leads keys whispering at his belt. You follow through the side door into a narrow passage where the warmth falls away at once. The stones sweat in the torchlight. Damp beads along the mortar, and the air smells of old lime cold iron, and something buttery from the room nearby. This is the passage beside the buttery stairs where barrels of ale salted, butter cheeses wrapped in cloth, and household stores are guarded more carefully than some cousins. In a castle, treasure is not always gold. Sometimes treasure is ale that hasn't soured cheese safe from mice, or a clean wool blanket in February. Master Odo waits halfway down the passage. He's smaller than you expected, with a bent back, a wool cap pulled over his ears and hands that look as though they were carved from the same rough stone he repairs. His belt carries a mason's hammer, a chisel-cord chalk, and a pouch of wedges. He greets the porter with a grunt, you with a glance, and the wall with a respect owed to a difficult elder. No shouting, he says. No one shouted, the porter replies. You are thinking loudly. The porter accepts this without protest, which tells you Master Odo has earned unusual rights here. A good mason understands the castle's body, which stones carry weight, which arches complain in frost, where rain enters, where a wall is merely thick and where it is hiding a secret. Odo lifts his hammer and taps the marked stone. The sound is dull. He taps the next stone, duller still. Then he taps a third lower and closer to the stair. The note changes. It is not loud or theatrical, but it has a thin emptiness to it, a small ring that travels into your teeth. The little dog who has followed with no shame pricks one ear. Odo taps again. Hollow. The servant beside you crosses himself. Could be a gap, says the mason. Could be a rat run, says the porter. Could be the devil's cupboard, mutters the servant, which helps no one. Odo turns his head slowly. If the devil has a cupboard here, he pays rent like anyone else. Even the monk who's appeared at the far end of the passage without anyone hearing him come almost smiles. Almost. The mason chalks a circle around the stone and another around the joint beside it. He explains that older builders often left pockets in thick walls where timbers once stood, where scaffolds were fixed or where repairs were made in haste after fire. Sometimes, too, people placed things in walls deliberately before sealing them. Charms at thresholds, written prayers above doors, bent pins under sills, bundles of herbs or hair. No one can quite agree whether these things were meant to lure danger trap, it confuse it, or simply comfort the people who feared it. You hold the torch while Odo works. The flame leans and licks, gilding the wet stones. Beyond the passage, someone rolls a barrel in the buttery, and the wooden rumble passes under your feet. A kitchen maid comes up the stairs with butter wrapped in linen and guarded against ash as carefully as a saint's relic. She pauses at the chalk mark. Found it then, she whispers. Found a sound, says Odo. A sound is not a thing. She nods unsatisfied and hurries away. Medieval households run on bread ale labour and rumours are often the quickest to rise. The monk steps closer, dark sleeves folded. This wall was mended after the old lord's time, he says. The porter frowns. You know that I read the accounts. Accounts say many things. They say lime was bought and 2 masons paid and a door blocked near the buttery after the winter sickness. At the words winter sickness, the passage seems to cool another degree. Even now it's hard to tell whether people speak more softly of illness, out of reverence, fear, or the belief that sickness might hear its name and come looking. The servant touches a charm at his neck, a small cloth packet sewn shut, perhaps holding a prayer rue or nothing but hope. Odo kneels, presses his ear near the wall and taps again with the handle of his hammer. The hollow note comes back clearer. He moves along the seam, tapping high, low, high, again mapping the emptiness by sound alone. His face does not change, but his fingers slow. There is a pocket, he says at last. Not large, sealed cleanly. Open it, asks the porter. Not in the dark. You're relieved, then disappointed, then faintly ashamed of being both. Water ticks somewhere behind the stone. The dog noses the base of the wall and sneezes. Master Odo marks the joints with 3 chalk crosses. At first light he says, "We loosen the mortar, carefully. If the wall complains, we stop." The porter nods, though his hand rests on his keys, as if keys can help with whatever waits inside stone. The monk says nothing. His eyes stay fixed on the lowest joint near the stair, where the hollow sound rang sharpest. You carry the torch back toward the hall, but the sound follows you tap, pause, tap, hollow. It settles into your steps, into the drip of damp, into the distant bell and the breathing castle. By the time warmth returns and smoke folds around you again, you feel that the wall has not been opened, no, not yet, but it has noticed you noticing it. You sleep lightly if what happens on the hall bench can truly be called sleep. Mostly you drift in and out of warmth, smoke, and the soft grumble of other people breathing. The fire sinks lower during the night. Servants bank the embers beneath ash, and the great hall becomes a dim country of shapes, benches like low hills, cloaks like sleeping animals, the high table fading into shadow. Somewhere in the rafters a pigeon shifts. Somewhere near your boots the little dog dreams with his paws twitching, perhaps chasing a rabbit, a ghost, or a dropped sausage from a kinder universe. The half-burned candle you saw earlier has been moved from the hearth edge to a niche near the door. Its flame is small and stubborn, shining on the tiny pale bone beside it. No one has thrown the bone away. You notice this when you wake before dawn, cold on one side and too warm on the other, with rushes pressed into the weave of your cloak. In a castle like this, things are not discarded quickly if they might mean something. A goose bone may be kitchen rubbish. It may also be a warning, a charm, or evidence of someone's untidy supper. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and so the safest choice is often to leave it near the fire and pretend the decision was wisdom. A bell sounds from the distant monastery, faint through the walls, calling the world toward its first prayers. No sunlight has yet reached the shutters. The servants move by memory, yawning as they sweep ash, stir the pot, and carry yesterday's trenchers away for dogs, beggars, or pigs, depending on which door they reach first. One boy brings in water from the yard ice, crusting the lip of his bucket. A woman warms her hands above the embers before kneading coarse bread dough on a floured board. The smell of yeast and smoke begins to soften the night's sourness. Then Master Odo arrives. He does not make an entrance. He simply appears at the side door with his tools, his wool cap low, his expression folded into the patient gloom of a man who's been awake longer than he wishes. Behind him comes the porter, with keys, the square-shouldered servant, and the suspicious monk whose ink-stained fingers are tucked into his sleeves. The monk looks as if he has slept even less than you. Though monks have a way of making sleeplessness seem like a moral achievement, you follow them back into the passage by the buttery stairs. The little dog follows too, because no official has yet explained to him that he is not part of the investigation. The passage is colder than the hall, and your breath shows in pale clouds. From below comes the faint smell of ale casks and salted cheese. A maid hurries past, carrying a wooden bowl of curds, glances at the chalk crosses, and nearly forgets to duck beneath the low beam. Life continues even when walls are suspected of secrets. Butter must still be fetched, bread must still rise, someone must still argue over whether the best ladle has gone missing. Odo kneels at the marked stones. He runs his thumb along the mortar joint, testing its age. Then he sets his chisel into the seam and taps gently with the hammer. The sound is not dramatic. It is small and careful, like a woodpecker trying not to wake a bishop. Dust falls in grey threads. The servant holds a basket beneath the wall to catch chips of lime and grit, because waste is waste, and old mortar can sometimes be crushed and used again in rough work. Medieval thrift has no romance in it, but it survives almost everything. The first stone loosens slowly. Odo does not pry like a treasure hunter. He coaxes, he taps, waits, listens, then taps again. At last the stone shifts forward with a soft scrape, and everyone in the passage leans in without meaning to. Behind the stone is darkness. Not a great chamber, not a skull grinning from the past, only a narrow pocket in the wall lined with dust and old lime. For a moment you feel foolish for expecting anything more. Then Odo reaches in with 2 fingers and draws out a shape so ordinary that it becomes stranger than any monster. A shoe. It is small, stiff and curled at the toe, made of dark leather gone almost black with age. The sole is worn thin. A split runs along one side and the lace is missing. The heel is bent inward as if someone walked in it until the foot gave up arguing. Odo sets it on a flat stone ledge. Dust clings to it like flour. No one speaks. Then the porter exhales. Well. The servant crosses himself. The monk bends closer, careful not to touch. A left shoe, he murmurs. Does that matter, you ask? No one can quite agree whether it matters, says the porter, which seems to be the castle's answer to everything hidden, old or inconvenient. Odo reaches again into the cavity and finds another larger cracked with a patch over the toe. Then a third, soft as dried bark, perhaps once belonging to a woman, perhaps to a boy, perhaps to anyone whose foot was narrow enough and whose purse was thin enough. There are 5 in all, tucked one behind another, not thrown carelessly but placed deep inside the wall. Worn shoes, ordinary shoes, shoes that have crossed mud, rush-strewn floors, market yards, chapel thresholds, stable muck and winter roads. Shoes that have known the shape of living feet. The passage seems to grow quieter around them. The old rushwoman arrives, drawn by rumour as surely as smoke finds rafters. She wipes her hands on her apron and nods as if the wall has behaved exactly as expected. Concealed shoes, she says. The servant looks uneasy. For witchcraft. For keeping witchcraft away, more like. Some swear that an old shoe shaped by the sweat and step of its wearer can confuse a wandering spirit. Others say it traps bad luck the way a worn path traps rainwater. A few insist shoes are hidden near hearths, doors, stairs and chimneys, because those are the places where troublesome things slip in. Even now it is hard to tell whether people believe the shoe itself holds power, or whether the power lies in the act of hiding something personal, something used, something that has carried a human life through dirt and weather. The monk straightens. There are records of such customs, he says, as though customs become less unsettling once trapped in ink, not approved customs. The porter grunts. Most useful customs are not approved until after they work. Odo turns the smallest shoe over. Inside, pressed into the stiff leather, is a little wad of something dry, perhaps wool, perhaps hair, perhaps only nesting left by a mouse. The servant steps backward. The dog sniffs the shoe, sneezes again, and loses interest, which comforts everyone more than any sermon could. You stand in the chill passage looking at the shoes lined on the ledge. They're not frightening in the sharp way of sudden noises or dark corners. They're creepy because they are tender. Someone held them once. Someone chose them from a pile of worn things and tucked them into stone while mortar was wet, perhaps, whispering a prayer, perhaps muttering a charm, perhaps only doing what their grandmother told them. A castle wall thick enough to stop arrows has been asked to hold a poor shoe against unseen trouble. Above you feet begin to cross the hall, servants, pages, cooks, men-at-arms. Their steps travel faintly through the stone. The living walk over the hidden traces of the dead, and for a moment the whole castle feels like a great old boot, patched, damp, stubborn, and still carrying everyone forward. Master Odo wraps the shoes in linen not because they are holy, but because no one quite dares treat them as rubbish. The porter marks the open stone with chalk. The monk says he will look again at the accounts. The rush woman says accounts will not tell him half as much as a grandmother with all her teeth, which in this castle may be the most scholarly remark of the morning. You follow them back toward the hall as the first grey light gathers behind the shutters. Behind you, the little hollow in the wall waits open, and the old shoes, freed from darkness, seem almost to remember the road. The morning settles into the castle slowly, as if even daylight must ask permission at the gate. Grey light slips through the narrow shutters of the great hall, touching the fresh rushes, the benches, the half-burned candle, and the little bones still resting near the hearth. The old shoes have been carried away in linen and set somewhere safe, though no one quite says where safe might be. In a place like this, safe can mean a locked chest, a chapel cupboard, or the shelf where servants put things they do not wish to explain twice. You warm your hands around a cup of thin ale while servants bring bread from the ovens. The loaves are coarse, dark, and round their crusts cracked like frozen earth. A cook's boy carries them in a wicker basket, proud for 3 steps, before nearly stumbling over the little dog who has positioned himself exactly where falling food is most likely. The boy hisses at him. The dog blinks with the calm dignity of a creature who has survived worse governments and kitchen discipline. Breakfast is plain, and welcome bread, a smear of soft cheese, a spoonful of yesterday's pottage revived over the fire, and a strip of smoked fish so salty it seems designed to remind the tongue of every sin it has ever committed. Around you, the household eats quickly. Work is already pulling people away. Buckets must be filled, ashes must be carried out, casks must be checked, chickens must be bullied into productivity. Somewhere in the yard, a cartwheel complains as someone tries to mend it, perhaps the same broken wheel you saw leaning in the passage the night before. Master Odo does not sit long. He chews bread with the focus of a man measuring mortar in his head. The porter speaks to him in low tones, pointing once toward the kitchen passage. You catch only fragments, chimney breast smoke draw old repair loose stone. The suspicious monk hears the same fragments and looks up from his cup. His eyes narrow with the weary resignation of a man who came to this castle to copy accounts, and has instead found himself surrounded by folk charms. Soon you're following them again, not through the cold passage by the buttery this time, but toward the kitchens where the castle's heart beats louder and greasier. The air changes before you enter. It thickens with heat, steam onions, singed feathers, sour ale, wet wood, and meat fat dripping into fire. The kitchen is a world of its own, ruled by speed habit and knives. Women with rolled sleeves chop roots on thick boards. Boys turn spits until their arms shake. A scullion kneels near a tub, scrubbing pots black enough to have known every meal since the conquest. Smoke climbs into a wide chimney where hooks, chains, and soot-black stones vanish upward into shadow. Above the hearth, a patch of masonry bulges slightly, as though the wall has swallowed something and never quite settled afterward. The cooks have known it for years, apparently, and ignored it with the confidence of people too busy to worry about stones unless they fall into soup. But now, after the shoes, every crack in the castle has become suspicious. The head cook is a broad woman with flour on one cheek and authority in both elbows. She stands with hands on hips while Odo studies the chimney breast. If you bring half that wall down, she says you can explain to the Lord why his dinner tastes of old lime. Odo touches the stones. If the wall comes down, dinner will have larger troubles than lime. She grunts, accepting the truth without liking it. You hold a lantern while he works near the hearth. Heat presses against your face. Sparks lift and vanish into smoke. The little dog stays at the kitchen threshold, wise enough not to enter a realm where feet move quickly and no one apologizes. A bunch of herbs hangs from a beam above you, sage, thyme, rue, and dried tansy. Rue one maid whispers keeps away both sickness and ill-wishing, though no one can quite agree whether it works better in a pouch in a pot or waved angrily at a neighbour. Odo taps the chimney stones with his hammer. Again comes that change in sound, solid, hollow. The kitchen seems to hush around it, though only for a breath. Then someone remembers the onions and chopping resumes more quietly. The mason loosens a small stone set high beside the chimney's shoulder. Soot rains down in soft black dust. The head cook mutters about ruined bread. The monk steps back to save his robe, which is perhaps the first practical decision you've seen him make. Odo eases the stone-free reaches into the narrow cavity and stops. His face changes almost not at all. That is how you know he has found something. He draws it out slowly. At first it looks like a bundle of dark cloth. Then the shape becomes clear, a cat dried hard by time and chimney heat. Its body curled, its mouth slightly open, its legs tucked close as if caught in the middle of sleep. The fur is mostly gone, though patches remain along the back and tail. Its empty eye sockets face the smoky room, and for one long moment no one breathes loudly. Then the head cook crosses herself with floury fingers. One maid whispers a prayer. The scullion drops his brush into the tub. The cat is not bloody, not fresh, not monstrous. It is old. That is what makes it strange. It has been in the wall for years upon years, hidden above the hearth. While generations boiled pottage, roasted birds, burned fingers, gossiped, laughed, wept into onions, and cursed damp firewood beneath it. Vermin charm, says the head cook at last, though her voice is softer than before. Against rats, asks the servant. Against rats, against witches, against whatever comes down chimneys when honest folk sleep. Some swear that dried cats were placed in walls and chimney spaces to frighten away mice-rats, spirits, witches, or bad luck. Others say the cat, being a hunter and a creature of thresholds, guards the passage between inside and outside. Even now it is hard to tell whether such things were sacrifices, charms, accidents, or grim little jokes left by builders with too much confidence in their own wisdom. In this kitchen no one laughs. The monk frowns. Such practices are not sanctioned. The head cook looks at him. Nor are rats in the flower, brother, but they come all the same. This settles the matter more effectively than theology. Odo lays the cat on a piece of sacking near the hearth. The kitchen folk keep glancing at it while pretending not to. One maid says her grandmother believed cats could hear the footfall of sickness before it entered a door. Another says black cats are lucky aboard ships but troublesome near cradles. A third says all cats are troublesome everywhere, which may be the most evidence-based belief offered so far. You look up into the chimney where smoke curls along the stones and daylight filters faintly from above. The hearth is the warmest place in the castle, the place where food becomes comfort and wet people become almost human again. Yet it is also an opening, a dark throat leading out to the sky. No wonder people feared what might come through it. Wind moans there at night, soot falls without warning, birds nest, bats flutter, sparks vanish upward like tiny souls escaping. A hidden cat above such a place begins to feel less like madness and more like a rough answer to a rough world. By the time the stone is set aside and the cavity brushed clean, the kitchen has resumed its rhythm. Knives chop, water steams, bread crusts crack. The old cat lies wrapped beside the shoe's memory, Another silent guardian pulled from the castle's body. You leave the kitchen smelling of smoke and sage, while behind you, the head cook orders everyone back to work loudly enough to prove she's not unsettled at all. Outside the kitchen passage, the little dog falls into step beside you. He does not look back at the hearth. Perhaps he knows the cat has done its watching already. By midday, the sky lowers itself over the castle like a lid. What had begun as a grey morning thickens into rain, slow at first, then steady, then so complete that the whole world beyond the walls seems made of dripping straw, black branches and blurred distance. Water runs from the gutters in clear ropes. The yard turns back into churned mud. Chickens retreat with deep personal offence. A cart trying to leave the lower gate gives up halfway through the attempt one wheel, sinking so stubbornly that even the horse looks betrayed by creation. So you remain inside as everyone does when weather has spoken firmly. In a medieval castle, rain rearranges the day as effectively as any lord. Journeys are delayed, firewood becomes a subject of urgent philosophy. Cloaks grow heavier by the moment, and every threshold sprouts a small puddle. Servants lay extra rushes near the doors. Wet boots are lined beside walls. Someone hangs wool blankets near the kitchen heat, and the smell of steaming sheep quietly conquers the passage. The porter, who seems to take foul weather as a private companion, stands in the gatehouse watching the rain pass through the open arch like a silver bead curtain. He has a cup of ale in one hand and his ring of iron keys resting against his hip. When he sees you, he nods toward a bench tucked against the inner wall. "No road worth taking now," he says. You sit beside him. The little dog curls at your feet at once, deciding that the porter's bench is a position of rare strategic excellence. From here you can see both the yard and the outer road beyond the gate, though each is washed pale by rain. The gatehouse smells of wet, stone-soaked wood, torch smoke, horse leather, and the cold, mineral scent of water seeping through places it has known longer than any person here. Above you the portcullis hangs like iron teeth in shadow. Near the wall lies a heap of damp straw waiting to be spread in the passage. A young guard rubs tallow into a bowstring and complains that wet weather bows to no king, priest or archer. In the corner an old woman mends a torn hood with thick thread, her fingers moving slowly but with the confidence of long practice. This too is medieval life waiting while rain speaks, repairing what can be repaired, and pretending you are not planning to go anywhere important anyway. The porter drinks, listens to the rain, and after a while says, "You have seen shoes and a cat. That is enough to make a stranger curious. You admit that it is." He gives a short grunt that might be amusement. Then you may as well see the bottles too. From beneath the bench he drags a small wooden chest, iron-bound and dull with age. One of his keys fits it after only 3 attempts, which in castle terms is near miraculous. He lifts the lid, and inside are several objects wrapped in scraps of linen. Not treasures, not jewels, only things that seem to carry the mood of old corners. He unwraps the first bundle and places on the bench a glass bottle clouded and greenish, its neck broken jaggedly, its body stained dark within. Another follows squat and brown, cracked down one side. A third is little more than fragments tied together in cloth so they do not scatter. Beside them he lays a twist of rusted pins, a coil of what looks like hair, and a dry bundle of herbs bound with thread blackened by time. Found in the gatehouse walls, you ask? In the gatehouse under the stair near the threshold, once in the outer wall by the drawbar. He touches the broken green bottle with one thick finger. Master Odo opened a pocket years ago. Thought he would find bad mortar. Found this instead. The rain drums harder overhead as if approving the timing. Some swear that bottles like these were set into walls or buried under hearths to catch mischief before it entered a house. Hair from the household nail clippings bent pins, rosemary rue, sometimes even a bit of urine, though the porter mercifully does not dwell on that part might be sealed inside. The idea, he says, is that whatever illness, curse, envy, or wandering harm is coming for you becomes snared by the bottle, instead confused by the personal traces within, trapped like a fly in sweet ale. No one can quite agree whether such things were made by wise women, frightened mothers, old soldiers, or priests pretending not to notice what everyone else did. The old woman mending her hood glances over. "My mother buried one under our byre door," she says without looking up, "after the cow sickened and the milk turned thin. Did it help, you ask?" She bites the thread, ties it off, and shrugs. The cow lived. This once again is enough. The porter unties the herb bundle. A dry smell rises, rosemary perhaps, and mugwort, maybe a little sage, though time has thinned the scents until they seem more memory than plant. A rusted pin falls onto the bench and rolls in a tiny circle. People think castles are only stone and iron, he says, but folk carry their fears inside with them, so the walls get fed on fear. A pin here, a prayer there, a shoe in one corner, a bottle in another, little bargains with the dark. The suspicious monk passes through the gatehouse, just then headed from the chapel toward the hall, his robe lifted clear of puddles. He sees the bottles, pauses, and gives them a look of weary dislike. "You should not encourage nonsense," he says to the porter. The porter does not rise to the bait, and yet nonsense has outlived many sermons. The monk folds his hands into his sleeves. "Trust belongs in God." "Aye," says the porter, "and dry firewood. But when one is late arriving, people make do with the other." The guard near the arch smothers a grin. Even the monk seems to know the rain has robbed him of the energy for argument. He inclines his head with chilly restraint and goes on, leaving behind a faint scent of damp wool and candle wax. The porter holds up the coil of hair. It is pale brown, tied with faded thread. This was in the brown bottle. A shiver runs along your arms, despite the closeness of the torch. Hair is intimate in a way stones are not. Someone cut this from a living head, perhaps from a child, perhaps from a wife, perhaps from the porter of 50 years ago, whose name no one remembers. To place it in a bottle and wall it up is to say, in the plainest possible way, that fear entered the household and was given a task: guard us. Outside, thunder mutters somewhere beyond the woods, not fierce, only distant and old. Rainwater runs beneath the gate and pools in the ruts. The little dog lifts his head, listens, then settles again with a sigh. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether dogs sleep so well because they are brave or because they wisely leave most worrying to people. The porter rewraps the bottles one by one. His hands are gentler now. These were not hidden because people were fools, he says. They were hidden because winter is long, children sicken, grain spoils, cows fail, and sometimes a house needs every kind of help it can ask for. You sit in the dim gatehouse while rain writes its patient lines across the afternoon. The chest closes. The keys chime softly. Somewhere beyond the yard the kitchen bell rings for the next meal. And as you rise from the bench, the walls around you no longer feel merely defensive. They feel inhabited in a deeper way, stuffed not only with stone and mortar, but with old hopes sealed up against the weather. By the time the kitchen bell calls the household toward the next meal, the rain has softened from a hard drumming to a patient dripping, as though the sky has tired itself out and now prefers quiet work. Water still threads from the eaves. The yard still glistens like black wool. But the castle, having endured the worst of it, begins to breathe again. Doors open. Servants hurry between passages carrying trenchers. Salt and a covered dish that smells richly of onions and broth. Somewhere a groom curses at a mule with the defeated affection of a man who has long since accepted that animals are often the more stubborn theologians. You eat standing this time near the lower end of the hall, with a chunk of coarse bread in one hand and a bowl of thick pottage in the other. It has been improved or disguised by the addition of cabbage and a little bacon fat, which in a medieval kitchen counts as festive optimism. The little dog appears at your knee at exactly the right moment, a skill that suggests either uncommon intelligence or a mystical devotion to dripping stew. You share the smallest lawful scrap and try not to let the steward see. The suspicious monk sits farther up the hall, speaking with the chaplain in low-clipped tones. The chaplain is round-faced, mild-eyed, and looks as if he has spent his life apologizing for other people's sins and damp manuscripts. Several times both men glance toward the chapel door. At first you think little of it. In a castle there are always glances, always corners where worry gathers. Then the porter crosses the hall toward you, wiping rain from his beard with the back of his hand. "The chapel wall is shedding," he says. You lower your bowl. Shedding lime wash has flaked near the north side altar. He gives the kind of shrug that means the matter is either ordinary or deeply inconvenient. The chaplain says there is something under it. You hand your bowl back to a passing servant and follow him. The chapel lies off a quieter passage away from the kitchen heat and the hall's smoky bustle. Here the air cools again, though not with the raw damp of the gatehouse. It smells of old beeswax, worn oak, wet stone, and the dry, powdery scent of lime. A shrine lamp burns before a small painted image of the Virgin, its flames steady in the stillness. Along the walls stand narrow benches polished by generations of knees and hands. A row of candles, some pale beeswax and some common tallow, burns unevenly before the altar. Their light licks at the gold leaf of a carved saint and makes the chapel feel at once humble and secretive, like a pocket stitched inside a larger garment. The chaplain stands near the north wall with a candle in hand. The suspicious monk is beside him, holding a flat wooden tray. Master Odo crouches below a patch of damaged lime wash, where a pale skin of plaster has curled away from the stone. On the floor around him lies a dusting of white flakes as light as old snow. Someone has spread a cloth beneath the area to catch the fallen bits. Medieval reverence, you notice, often looks like placing a rag in the right spot before things get worse. The chaplain inclines his head to you. "The damp has loosened this part," he murmurs. "We thought it best to inspect it before it falls into the candle shelf or onto the altar linen." The monk adds, "and before stories begin." "Stories have already begun," says the porter. This seems impossible to dispute. You come nearer. Beneath the broken lime wash, the wall shows an uneven hollow no larger than a loaf of bread. At first you see only dust and stone. Then Odo, with the tip of a small knife, clears a little more of the crusted edge, and something pale emerges from the darkness within. Bone. Not a whole arm, not a skull, grinning out of the saints, nothing so theatrical. Only several small bones, yellow, white and dry, nested together in a cavity behind the plaster. There may be finger bones among them. There may be fragments of something larger. For a moment your mind insists on horrors. Then the chaplain quietly exhales and makes the sign of the cross, not in panic, but in that old, careful way of acknowledging that the dead have entered the conversation. No one can quite agree whether such things are relics, he says softly, or only old burials shifted during repairs. The monk frowns. Relics should be identified. Relics are often identified, says the porter, after they have already acquired excellent reputations. The chaplain gives him a warning glance, though not an angry one. Master Odo widens the opening by a finger's breadth, careful not to disturb more than necessary. Behind the loose plaster sits a tiny niche in the wall, deliberately made and then sealed over. Inside are bones wrapped in what was once cloth, now mostly dust. Beside them lies a sliver of wood and something like a bead, dark with age. The monk leans in. Could be from the altar's consecration. The chaplain nods slowly. Some altars are sealed with relics. A fragment of a holy person if one can be obtained. A bone, a piece of cloth, a token from a shrine. Some swear that no chapel is fully protected unless a saint watches from within its very stones. Others say bones placed in walls are less about blessing than fear. Fear of plague, fear of famine, fear of sudden death. Fear that prayer spoken in an empty room might not climb high enough without a saintly nudge. Even now it is hard to tell whether such hidden remains were meant to honour heaven, persuade heaven, or simply steady the hearts of those kneeling below. The porter shifts his weight, and if they are not relics, the chaplain looks at the little hollow. Then someone hid them for safekeeping, or penance, or memory. The word penance settles heavily. There are tales, it seems, of bones tucked into chapel walls after troubled deaths, when a family wanted prayers near at hand but not too many questions asked. There are tales of tiny reliquaries broken open in hard times and distributed in secret when a church was rebuilt. There are tales of monks concealing doubtful relics behind plaster rather than admit that the cherished bone of Saint whoever might in truth belong to a goat, a thief, or both. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and uncertainty in a chapel seems to grow twice as fast as elsewhere. A serving woman enters briefly with fresh altar linen folded over her arms. She stops when she sees the open niche. "Holy Mother," she whispers. "Quite possibly," says the porter. The chaplain gives him another look, sterner this time, though you can see the corner of the porter's mouth almost shift. The woman retreats, crossing herself so quickly that her fingers nearly trip over the gesture. Odo draws the cloth bundle out with immense care and lays it on the wooden tray. It weighs almost nothing. The bones inside knock together with the faintest sound, softer than walnut shells. The bead rolls against the tray edge. The sliver of wood, once cleaned, reveals a carved line or two, perhaps part of a cross, perhaps part of a box. The monk immediately wants records. The chaplain immediately wants prayer. The porter seems to want a stool and a less complicated afternoon. You stand in the candlelight and watch wax gather along the sides of the candles in slow, shining tears. Above the altar, smoke has stained the stone in thin shadows. Beneath your boots, the floor is cold. You think of how many knees have pressed here in worry mothers begging for a child's fever to break, soldiers promising reform if they survive servants, praying not to drop the Lord's dinner, old men asking for an easier winter. A castle chapel is small, but it gathers the heaviest things. The chaplain at last wraps the bundle in clean linen and places it near the altar. "Until we know more," he says. The monk mutters, "If we know more." And there it is again, that medieval honesty. Not certainty, not thunder from heaven, only a little bundle of bones, a flaking wall, a room of candles, and a handful of people trying to decide whether they have found holiness housekeeping or a very old embarrassment. When you leave the chapel, the air beyond feels coarser, somehow full of smoke and supper and ordinary labour. Behind you, the bell rope stirs as the chaplain reaches for it. In another moment, the chapel will ring with prayer, and the hidden bones will wait in their fresh linen quiet as ever while the castle goes on. The chapel bell follows you into the passage, soft at first, then fuller, as its sound finds stone beam stair and yard. It does not ring like a bright village bell in summer. It has a muted winter voice dampened by rain and thick walls, as if each note has been wrapped in wool before being sent into the castle. Servants pause where they stand. A maid lowers her basket. The porter inclines his head not deeply but enough. Even the little dog looks up, puzzled by this human habit of striking metal whenever the air grows serious. You walk back toward the hall with the smell of beeswax still in your cloak. The bundle of bones remains behind near the altar, folded into clean linen and uncertain meaning. The monk has stayed with the chaplain, already demanding account rolls, chapel inventories, and old hands able to remember older hands. You suspect he will find 6 answers, none of them complete, and dislike all of them equally. The rain fades by degrees. In the great hall, light from the high shutters has turned pale and grainy, the kind of afternoon light that makes dust visible and people sleepy. A servant has propped the outer door open to carry out a tub of dirty rushes, and cold air slides in across the floor, stirring the rosemary scattered underfoot. Near the hearth, the old bone and half-burned candle are gone at last, though a faint wax mark remains on the stone. Nothing in a castle disappears entirely. It only changes places. You are handed a cup of small ale and a heel of bread because in this household every mystery is apparently best endured with something to chew. A clerk sits at the lower table, surrounded by parchment scraps. Wooden tally sticks a pot of ink, and the exhausted patience of a man whose work depends on everyone else remembering numbers accurately. His fingers are stained black at the tips. A goose quill rests behind his ear. He looks younger than the monk, but equally troubled perhaps because he has been trying to balance accounts for candles, oats, salt fish, and repairs to a stable roof that seems determined to become sky. The porter nods toward him. Martin here says he has found a panel that will not sit right. The clerk looks up. I said it has warped. Warped things often hide worse things, says the porter. Everything in this castle is warped. Martin replies, which is less complaint than documented truth. The panel stands behind a hanging cloth near the steward's counting corner, where a narrow wooden screen shields the table from draughts and curious eyes. It is made of dark oak carved with a faded vine pattern and set into the wall beside an old cupboard, used for rolls, seals, spare quills, and the small sand pot used to dry ink. One plank bows outward. The gap behind it is no wider than a knife blade, but once shoes, cats, bottles and bones have appeared, no gap remains innocent. Master Odo is fetched again. He arrives with a piece of bread still in hand, looks at the panel and sighs so deeply that it seems to come from the foundations. Wood now, he says. The castle grows generous. The clerk holds a candle close while Odo examines the panel's edge. You smell dust, wax old oak and ink. The warped plank bears scratches near the bottom, as if someone once pried at it with a blade. Above it, the hanging cloth shows a hunting scene so faded that the stag looks less pursued than mildly inconvenienced. The porter lifts the cloth aside and hooks it over a peg. No one can quite agree whether this screen came from the old solar, Martin says. The steward says it did. The cook says it came from a merchant's house after the fire. The chaplain says we should stop asking questions about property taken after fires. A wise man says the porter. Odo works a thin wedge into the seam. The panel creaks. Somewhere behind you the little dog sneezes, perhaps from dust, perhaps from judgment. The clerk flinches when the wood pops free, then pretends he has not. Odo draws the plank outward slowly and a narrow space opens between panel and stone. Inside lie papers. Not one but many folded scraps, curled account strips, little packets sealed with dark wax and a few pieces that may once have been tied together, but now slump apart like old leaves. Dust has gathered thickly over them. A spider disturbed from ancestral property retreats with admirable dignity into a crack. Martin's face changes at once. Fear gives way to hunger. Not bodily hunger, but the special hunger of an ink-stained clerk who has found old writing. He reaches in, then stops when Odo clears his throat. Carefully says the mason, "If it survived this long, do not kill it with enthusiasm." This is advice useful in many parts of life, though not always followed. They lay the papers on the table near the window. You help hold the candle while Martin loosens the first folded scrap. The wax seal has cracked, showing the mark of a ring pressed long ago. Perhaps a bird, perhaps a flower, perhaps a blob made official by confidence. The writing inside is cramped and brown. Martin reads slowly, lips moving without sound. It is a letter about a debt owed for wool cloth, and 2 measures of barley written with the stern politeness people reserve for money they do not expect to see soon. Another scrap lists repairs after a winter storm tiles, nails lime 2 days' labour for a carpenter ale for the men working on the roof. A third notes the purchase of beeswax for the chapel and tallow for the hall. Medieval life appears again in its most honest form, not legends but expenses. Then Martin finds a smaller packet wrapped in linen thread. When he opens it, a little metal badge falls into his palm. It is dull pewter, shaped like a scallop shell, the kind pilgrims wear after travelling to a shrine. Its edges are bent and the pin on the back has broken away. A pilgrim badge, the porter says. Martin turns it over, hidden with letters, or lost behind the panel says, Odo, or placed there, says the porter. Some swear that pilgrim badges carry a bit of blessing from the road and shrine where they were bought. They are sewn to hats, cloaks and bags, shining proudly until rain, mud or careless fingers dull them. Others tuck them into walls, chests or bedding to keep sickness away, to guard travellers, or to remind heaven of a vow paid in sore feet. Even now it is hard to tell whether this badge slipped from someone's cloak or was hidden deliberately behind the panel like a small tin prayer. You touch the edge of your own token through your pouch and think of the muddy road, the river mist, the distant abbey bell. Pilgrimage sounds noble in songs. In practice it is blisters, bad inns, suspicious stew, and the quiet hope that arrival will mean something. Martin continues sorting. One letter mentions the blocked doorway near the buttery after the winter sickness. At this the porter's eyes lift. Another scrap refers to shoes given to a mason's wife. Another records payment for chimney repair. These are not answers exactly, but they are threads, thin and frayed, tying the hidden things to ordinary hands. The castle has not swallowed monsters. It has swallowed paperwork, prayers, debts, charms, repairs, and the little metal proof that someone once walked far for mercy. The suspicious monk enters near the end, drawn by the scent of old documents as surely as the dog is drawn by stew. He takes in the table, the badge, the opened panel, and Martin's bright eyes. "Do not scatter them," he says. Martin stiffens. "I know my work." The porter leans toward you. That means they will both scatter them, but learnedly. Outside the rain stops. Water drips from the eaves in slower beats. The clerk places the pilgrim badge beside the letters, and afternoon light rests on its bent shell. For a moment it seems less creepy than lonely, a little sign from a road long-ended hidden behind oak. While generations counted, candles argued over barley warmed their hands and forgot the person who carried it here. The bent pilgrim badge remains on the clerk's table, catching the weak afternoon light like a little dull moon. Around it lie the old letters, account scraps, wax fragments, and the faint smell of dust awakened after years of sleep. Martin the clerk bends over them with reverence, as if each scrap of debt and barley might confess a sin if stared at long enough. The suspicious monk stands beside him, correcting the angle of one parchment by half a finger's width, which seems to give him more comfort than the chapel bones ever did. You linger near the table, watching ink return the castle to itself. There is something calming about the records, candles, bought tiles, mended ale paid to workmen lime-ordered after storms. All the eerie things pulled from walls begin to look less like hauntings and more like the scattered habits of frightened practical people. A shoe for luck, a cat for the chimney, a bottle for envy, a badge for a blessing, a bone for heaven or memory or some older confusion no one dares name too loudly. Then Master Odo, who's been studying the exposed space behind the panel, leans closer to the stone beyond it. The room quiets in a small way. He sets 2 fingers against the back wall and presses. A draught touches the candle flame. Not a strong draught, not enough to make anyone gasp, only a thin breath of cold air slipping through some hidden joint. The candle leans toward it, delicate and eager. The little dog sleeping beneath the table with his chin on his paws opens one eye. Odo does not speak at once. He takes a narrow iron probe from his belt and slides it into the crack behind the wooden frame. It goes farther than expected. The porter sees it and sighs. There is always another hole. Martin frowns. There should be solid wall there. In this castle, says the porter, solid is more of a hope than a promise. The monk steps closer. That wall backs onto the stair turret. No, says Odo, not quite. There is thickness between. The word thickness changes the air. Castles are full of thick places, walls broad enough to hold stairs, chambers, guardrobes, storage niches, murder holes, forgotten drains and the private mistakes of builders who are long past scolding. A wall can look plain from the hall, and yet contain a narrow world within it, a stone pocket where wind gathers and secrets grow pale. Odo removes more of the warped panel, then another strip of wood at the side. Behind it, hidden by the screen, is a small arched opening blocked with rough stones and old mortar. It is no taller than your shoulder and so neatly covered that the hanging cloth would have hidden it from anyone not already suspicious. The mortar is dry, pale and crumbly. Odo touches it with his thumb. This was sealed later, he says. The porter's hand moves to his keys, though no key has any use here. A servant is sent for a lantern, another for a pry bar, and someone inevitably for the chaplain. While they are gone, the hall tries to continue around the discovery. A maid carries cups past without looking. A boy sweeps, rushes near the hearth with great seriousness. From the kitchen passage comes the steady rhythm of chopping, the castle's reminder that even sealed mysteries must wait until onions are finished. Medieval life never pauses completely. Fear may enter the hall, but supper still expects to be served. When the chaplain arrives, he brings with him the faint scent of beeswax and chapel linen. He looks at the blocked arch, then at the monk. No one told me there was a doorway here, he says. No one told me either, says the monk, as if personally offended by the past. Odo begins to loosen the stones. They come free more easily than the wall stones by the buttery. This blocking was not meant to hold weight, only to hide space. One by one the stones are lifted down and set onto a cloth so the rushes do not swallow the smaller chips. Dust spills outward. The candle flame trembles again. A smell follows stale air, old straw, cold ashes, and something faintly sour like a blanket shut too long in a chest. At last the opening is wide enough for the lantern. The porter lifts it and leans forward. Beyond the arch lies a narrow stair curving upward inside the wall. The steps are steep, shallow, and furred with dust. They vanish after 5 turns into darkness. For a moment no one moves. Even the kitchen sounds seem farther away. The castle has opened not a cupboard, not a niche, but a hidden vein. Priest hole, whispers a servant. The chaplain shakes his head slowly. Too old for that, perhaps. Smuggler's stair, says another. In a castle, Martin murmurs. People smuggle in castles too, says the porter. Mostly food from kitchens. Some swear that hidden stairs were made for escape in siege, for servants moving unseen, for guards reaching wall walks, or for lords who preferred not to meet people they had invited. Others say sealed spaces are sometimes created by accident when buildings are rebuilt around older rooms. No one can quite agree whether this stair was designed as secrecy, convenience, fear, or simple medieval overbuilding, which is the art of solving one problem by creating 3 future ones. Odo goes first because masons do not trust other people's feet. The porter follows with the lantern. You follow after him, ducking through the low arch, your shoulder brushing cold stone. The little dog attempts to come too, but the monk blocks him with one sandaled foot, and for once the dog accepts defeat. Behind you the hall light shrinks. The stair is close and tight. Your breath returns to you from the walls. The stone is damp in places, dry in others. Dust lifts around your boots in slow, grey clouds. Halfway up, your hand finds a groove worn into the wall by fingers long gone. That detail unsettles you more than the darkness. Many people have climbed here, or one person climbed often. At the top, the stair opens into a chamber no larger than a cart shed built inside the thickness between outer wall and hall. It has no proper door, only the blocked stair below, and a narrow slit facing the yard hidden from outside by ivy and old stonework. The lantern light crawls over the floor. There are rushes here, old rushes, brown and brittle, spread in a thin layer over stone. Against one wall lies a bundle of rotted bedding, straw scraps of wool, a torn blanket stiff with age. Near it sit 3 candle stubs burned nearly to the base. A wooden cup rests upside down beside them. In the corner is a crust of something black and dry that may once have been bread. On the wall, scratched with a nail or knife, are several marks, short vertical lines grouped in 5s. The porter raises the lantern higher. No one can quite agree whether tally marks count days, he says softly, or prayers. No one answers. You stand very still. The chamber is not dramatic. It contains no treasure, no chains, no painted curse. It is worse in its quietness. Someone waited here. Someone breathed this stale air, burned these candles, slept or tried to sleep on this mean bedding while the castle moved around them. Below, people would have eaten pottage, swept rushes, argued about hens, trimmed candles, and never known how close another life had been folded into the wall. The chaplain, who has climbed behind you with surprising care, murmurs a prayer under his breath. The monk studies the marks, his face unreadable. Odo crouches by the bedding and touches nothing. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the hidden room sheltered a runaway, a sick servant, a hunted guest, a punished soul, or someone kept safe for reasons that became shameful later. The accounts may yet offer a clue, or they may not. Records are faithful only to what someone thought worth writing down. You look through the narrow slit. Below in the wet yard, the broken cartwheel still leans by the passage waiting. Smoke lifts from the kitchen roof. The monastery bell sounds in the distance, gentle and worn. For one breath, past and present lie close together, the vanished watcher in the wall, the servants below the dog waiting by the hall, and you holding cold stone with one hand while the lantern trembles in the other. Then the porter lowers the light. We leave it open, he says, but not alone. And as you descend the narrow stair, the hidden chamber remains behind you, no longer sealed, yet not at peace, either holding its stale rushes and candle stubs, like the last small comforts of a person nobody has remembered how to name. By the time you return to the hall, evening has begun to gather in the high corners of the castle. The hidden stair remains open behind the clerk's screen, guarded by a bench, dragged across the low arch, and by the porter's promise that no fool child, dog, or curious cousin is to crawl into it without Master Odo present. This naturally makes nearly everyone in the household want to crawl into it at once. Medieval warnings have a way of becoming invitations when attached to a dark hole in a wall. The little dog is waiting near the lower table with the injured dignity of one excluded from important business. He follows you to the hearth where the fire has been built high against the damp evening. Smoke rolls upward into the rafters and gathers there in a dark blue haze. The fresh rushes are already flattened in paths where servants have crossed and recrossed. Rosemary cracks softly under boots. Wet cloaks steam on pegs. Somewhere in the yard a horse stamps and the sound comes through the shutter like a dull knock from another world. Supper is slower than the meals before it, perhaps because the rain has trapped everyone inside, perhaps because the open chamber has shaken loose more talk than dust. Trenchers are set along the boards. Wooden bowls are filled with pottage thickened by peas and barley. Smoked fish arrives on a platter silver grey and stiff, followed by onions cooked soft in fat, a dish of beans and a basket of bread that looks as if it has fought bravely against the oven and lost with honour. Ale is poured generously, though the steward watches the jug as if it might sneak away wearing a cloak. You sit among servants' guards and household folk whose faces glow and fade in firelight. The porter lowers himself onto the bench with a sigh of deep architectural age. Master Odo sits nearby, turning a heel of bread in his hands. The clerk Martin has ink on his sleeve and dust in his hair. The suspicious monk has also come to supper, though he looks at the smoked fish as if it has failed an examination in moral discipline. At first the talk stays practical. Someone asks whether the hidden chamber weakens the wall. Odo says no, provided no one takes a hammer to it, which seems pointed. Someone asks if the old bedding must be burned. The chaplain from farther up the hall says it should be examined first. The head cook says anything that has lain in a wall longer than her grandmother deserves fire, vinegar, or both. No one can quite agree whether vinegar cleanses corruption, bad smells, evil influence, or merely the conscience of the person splashing it around, but the kitchen swears by it. Then, as ale warms the room and the wind begins worrying at the shutters, the stories rise. The old Rush woman begins with the West Tower, where she says a mason once heard a baby crying inside a wall 3 nights before a noblewoman died. She says this while tearing bread into her pottage calmly as if discussing turnips. A groom objects that the sound was more likely a fox outside the ditch. The woman gives him a look usually reserved for men who believe they understand childbirth weather or laundry. Foxes do not cry from stone, she says. The porter takes a drink. Depends on the stone. This earns a few quiet laughs, though everyone glances toward the blocked arch just the same. A guard tells of a manor house beyond the river where builders placed a horse skull beneath the threshold before raising the doorframe. Some swear such skulls keep a house strong, or warn away thieves, or give the building a voice so it can answer thunder. Others say horse skulls were hidden under floors because their hollow shape made music sound richer when people danced above them. Even now it is hard to tell whether that is belief craft or a convenient explanation invented after someone found a skull where no skull should politely be. Martin says he once copied an account from an abbey where coins were buried under a new wall to bless the foundation. Bent coins, he adds, so they could not be spent. Cruel thing to do to a coin, says the porter. A holy thing, says the monk. A coin may hold both opinions, says Odo. You sip your ale and let the hall's warmth settle into your bones. The stories are not told to frighten in the loud way of market players or drunken soldiers. They drift out gently wrapped in smoke and hunger and fatigue. A maid speaks of rowan twigs tied above a dairy door to keep butter from being stolen by envy. The head cook says iron laid near the cradle keeps harmful things from leaning too close, though she adds that a good older sister with a wooden spoon works nearly as well. A carter insists that if a wall cracks after blessing something inside has refused the priest. The chaplain hears this from the high table and closes his eyes briefly, perhaps praying for patience, perhaps counting the number of wrong ideas he lacks strength to correct. The suspicious monk finally speaks. Walls crack from damp settling frost, poor lime and bad workmanship. Odo lifts his head. Bad workmanship. The monk pauses, or other causes known to masons. This retreat is wise and noted by all. A servant boy asks whether the hidden chamber might hold a voice at night now that it is open. No one answers quickly. Wind presses at the shutters. A candle gutters and steadies. In the rafters a pigeon gives a soft, unpleasant coo. The porter sets his cup down. Old rooms make old sounds. Air moves. Rats move. Timbers cool. Stone shifts. And people hear what their hearts have brought with them. This is sensible enough to comfort you, but not so sensible that it shuts the matter away. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a whispered wall is only draught and mouse scratch, or whether places remember the fear pressed into them. In the hall under the soot-black beams, both answers feel possible. You think of the hidden shoes shaped by vanished feet, the dried cat above the hearth watching over flame and chimney, the bottles with pins and hair, the bones folded in chapel linen, the letters and pilgrim badge, the stale bedding in the sealed chamber. None of them belongs to a single grand mystery. They are smaller than that and perhaps deeper. They are the private grammar of people who lived with darkness close to the door and winter always returning. Supper thins as bowls empty. Servants scrape trenches for the dogs. The little dog receives another scrap by accident or by destiny, depending on whose account survives. The monk withdraws toward the chapel. Martin gathers his papers again. Odo sits staring into the fire, his hammer across his knees. At last the porter leans nearer and says, "Before dawn we will check where that stair leads along the outer wall. There is a draught in it, and draughts have sources. You nod, though the thought of entering more cold stone before sunrise makes your blanket seem suddenly precious. For now you remain by the hearth. The hall murmurs itself towards sleep. Beyond the bench and the screen, the opened stair waits in darkness, while around you the castle folk trade their last quiet whispers, feeding the fire with wood and the walls with memory. The hall sinks into sleep by slow degrees, not all at once, but like embers settling beneath ash. Voices fade into murmurs, then into breath. The last bowls are carried away. The benches are pulled closer to the walls. Someone hangs a damp cloak too near the hearth, and the smell of wet wool rises once more familiar, now almost companionable. The little dog curls against your boot with the stubborn trust of a creature who has chosen you without paperwork, oath, or permission from the steward. You sleep only lightly. The opened stair behind the screen has changed the shape of the room in your mind. Even with your eyes closed, you seem to know where it waits low, dark and cold beyond the hanging cloth, and the warped panel breathing its thin draught into the hall. Each time a log shifts in the fire, each time a sleeper coughs, each time a pigeon scratches in the rafters, you wake enough to remember the tally marks in the sealed chamber and the stale rushes lying there like a bed no one wished to name. Before dawn, the distant monastery bell sounds again. It comes faintly through stone and shutter, a low pulse in the dark, calling monks from blankets and travellers from uneasy dreams. A servant touches your shoulder. He is the same square-shouldered man who helped Odo by the buttery wall, and in the dimness his face looks carved from tired bread dough. Porter says, "Come quietly," he whispers. You rise carefully, easing your boot from beneath the dog's chin. The dog opens one eye, judges the hour, and decides that friendship has limits. He remains by the warm ash, which may be the wisest decision made in the castle that morning. The hall is nearly black except for the banked fire and one half-burned candle set near the clerk's table. Its flame trembles in the draught from the hidden stair. The porter waits beside it, keys looped in his fist to keep them from clattering. Master Odo stands with a small lantern and his hammer. The suspicious monk is there too, hood drawn up, face pale in the candlelight ink stains still ghosting his fingers. He carries a small book bound in worn leather, as if written authority may prove useful against rats' draughts or whatever else lives inside walls. The porter lifts the bench aside. Odo ducks through the low arch first. You follow, bending your head, one hand against the chilled stone. Behind you the servant comes with a second lantern, and the monk enters last, muttering something that might be prayer or complaint. The stair curves upward into darkness, but this time Odo turns not toward the hidden chamber above. Instead, halfway up he stops beside a place where two stones meet at an odd angle. In last night's lantern light it seemed only a corner. Now with patience and the mason's knowing hand it becomes a narrow slit. Here, Odo says. The porter brings forward a key, though again no proper lock is visible. He slides the iron stem into a hole hidden beneath a crust of lime. Something inside clicks, then sticks, then clicks again. after he gives it a persuasive twist. The keys on his ring whisper softly, and in that tight darkness the sound seems much too loud. A small stone-faced door shifts inward. Cold air spills out. It is sharp enough to make your eyes water. It smells of frost rat droppings, old dust, and the distant outdoors. Beyond the door lies a mural passage, a narrow walkway built inside the thickness of the outer wall. You step into it sideways. Your shoulders nearly brush both sides. Above you the ceiling slopes low, and below your boots the floor is uneven, patched with stone dirt and the dry powder of crumbled mortar. The lantern light reaches only a few paces ahead before the passage bends into blackness. Some swear mural passages were made so guards could move unseen along the walls during attack. Others insist they were used by servants, messengers, or lords who preferred their comings and goings to remain politely mysterious. No one can quite agree whether secrecy in a castle is usually military, domestic, romantic, or merely the result of builders refusing to waste a thick wall. You move slowly. Odo taps the floor ahead with the handle of his hammer. The servant keeps close behind, breathing through his mouth. The monk's robe rasps softly against stone. Somewhere ahead something small skitters, pauses, and skitters again. The servant freezes. Rat, says the porter. Large rat, whispers the servant. Then a prosperous rat, says the porter. Good for him. The passage turns and a line of pale light appears through an arrow slit. Outside, dawn has not yet broken fully, but frost has silvered the yard. The broken cartwheel leans where it did before, rim shining white. A stable boy crosses below with 2 buckets. Shoulders hunched, breath smoking in the air. He has no idea you are watching from inside the wall. This more than any tale makes the passage feel secret. The castle contains hidden eyes. The monk leans toward the slit. This faces the yard and the chapel roof. Odo nods, and farther on the outer stair. You continue. The cold deepens near each opening. Your fingers stiffen around your cloak. In one recess the porter finds a rusted hook fixed into the wall, perhaps for a lantern, perhaps for a weapon, perhaps for something less easy to name. Beneath it lies a small scatter of nutshells, old and dry, left by rats or by some watcher with poor manners. Nearby, scratched into the stone, you see a cross and 3 tiny circles. The monk notices them too. He touches the marks with one finger but says nothing. Charm, the servant whispers. Or boredom, says Odo. Both leave marks. There is an old habit, the porter tells you quietly, of scratching crosses near narrow places. Stair turns and doorways, not always as official blessing, but as a small guard for those passing through. Some people mark stone before a journey, before childbirth, before a winter fever runs through a household. Some swear circles trap harmful eyes, holding their gaze where they can do no worse. Even now it is hard to tell whether the hand that made these marks trembled with fear, devotion, or simple idleness during a long cold watch. The passage narrows further. Odo stops and raises the lantern. Ahead the floor dips where damp has eaten mortar. In the hollow lies an old iron key red with rust, half buried in dust. The porter crouches with surprising care and picks it up. It is smaller than the keys at his belt, finer too, with a bow shaped like a clumsy heart. He turns it over in his palm. Does it open anything, you ask? The porter looks down the dark passage, then back toward the sealed places already found. Every key opens something, he says. The trouble is whether the door still remembers. No one laughs. The cold has made jokes thinner here. A sudden flutter bursts above your head. The servant gasps. The monk ducks. A bat disturbed from some crack in the ceiling flickers through the lantern light and vanishes behind you like a torn scrap of night. Your heart beats quickly, then slows. The porter exhales through his nose. Not a demon, he says, too polite. At last the passage ends near a blocked outer stair filled with fallen stone and packed earth. The draught comes through gaps beyond it, carrying the smell of frost, wet ivy and morning. There is no open escape, no hidden army route, no immediate answer. Only a forgotten way inside the wall, used once sealed partly by time and littered with small signs of human and animal passing. Odo studies the blockage. Not today, he says. This wants daylight and more hands. The monk closes his little book without having opened it. And perhaps fewer stories. The porter slips the rusted key into a pouch. Stories fit through cracks better than men do. You turn back through the mural passage, warmer now only because you know the way. Through the arrow slit the first true light of morning touches the yard. The monastery bell fades. Smoke lifts blue from the kitchen roof. Somewhere below the little dog begins barking, not in alarm but in firm protest that breakfast exists without him. When you step back into the hall, the fire's low warmth feels gentle as a blanket. The hidden passage remains behind you, cold and narrow, holding its scratches, rat runs, frost breath, and old iron silence. Morning opens beyond the gate in a wash of pale light and wet earth. The rain has gone, leaving the castle stones dark and shining, every ledge jewelled with drops, every rut in the yard filled with cold brown water. Smoke lifts from the kitchen roof in a soft blue ribbon. The broken cartwheel has finally been dragged beneath the covered passage, where two men argue over whether the spoke can be saved, or whether it has entered the long honourable retirement of firewood. Nearby the little dog barks at a chicken with the conviction of a herald announcing war, though the chicken receives the challenge with majestic indifference. You eat a quick morning meal near the hearth bread still warm from the oven, a spoon of thick pottage and ale weak enough to seem almost shy. The hidden passages of the wall have left a chill in your hands that does not quite fade even with the cup between your palms. The porter returns from speaking with the steward and nods toward the gate. Market day, he says. Best place to learn what people are hiding in walls is from those who sell the things people hide. So you follow him out through the yard, past the damp straw, the well, the stable doors and the watchman rubbing sleep from his face beneath the gate arch. Master Odo remains behind to examine the blocked stair by daylight, and the suspicious monk has withdrawn to the chapel records where he may be safer from bottles, cat's shoes and popular opinion. The porter carries the rusted little key in his pouch, though he says nothing more about it. Keys like secrets grow heavier when no lock has yet confessed to them. Outside the castle gate the world has gathered itself into a market. It is not large, but after the cold inner walls it feels full of colour and motion. Farmers stand beside baskets of onions, leeks, turnips and hard winter apples. A fishwife has smoked eels laid on straw, shining darkly, while a man from the upland sells coarse wool wooden bowls, and a goat that appears deeply disappointed in every human present. A toll clerk sits beneath a patched awning marking goods and muttering over pennies because even mud hunger and holy days must make room for fees. You move slowly among the stalls. Boots suck softly in the wet ground. Cloaks brush against one another. Bells jingle from a mule's harness. The air smells of damp wool, horse dung, fried onions, leather fish smoke, and the sharp green scent of herbs crushed under passing feet. A pilgrim with badges sewn to his hat stands near a roadside shrine, touching each badge in turn, as though counting memories. One is a scallop shell like the little bent token found behind the panel. Another shows a saint so worn by fingers and weather that he might be anyone holy enough to survive bad carving. A peddler calls softly from a cloth spread beneath the castle wall. On it lie pins, ribbons, beads, little knives, clay whistles, bent nails, iron rings, and tiny packets stitched shut with red thread. He has the quick eyes of a man who knows that fear sells well when wrapped small enough to fit in a sleeve. The porter stops before him. Show the traveller your household comforts. The peddler smiles, revealing 3 strong teeth and several historical absences. For thresholds, cradles, buyers' chimneys, or jealous neighbours, all of them if the price is low, says the porter. The man lifts a packet. Rue and rosemary, good above a door, keeps the air sweet and the spite confused. He lifts another, salt and ash, for corners, then a small twist of iron wire, for the cradle. You ask why iron matters. The peddler looks almost pleased. Cold iron troubles what comes from the wild places, they say, keeps wandering things from leaning too close. Some swear iron near a bed cradle or threshold discourages harmful spirits, ill-wishing and night terrors. Others say it is simply useful because iron belongs to tools, knives, hinges, ploughs, and all the practical powers that push back wilderness. No one can quite agree whether the charm lies in the metal itself, in the blessing spoken over it, or in the comfort of knowing something hard and man-made rests between a sleeper and the dark. Beside the peddler sits a woman with bundles of herbs tied in neat rows. She sells sage for smoke lavender, for linen chests fennel, for the stomach comfrey, for bruises, and a bitter little bag of wormwood that she promises will discourage fleas, worms, and unwanted conversation if brewed too strongly. A boy nearby displays a jar of leeches in water. They cling to the glass like damp black threads, patient and unpleasantly purposeful. Good for swelling, the boy says. Good for bad blood. The porter leans toward you. Also good for making a person reconsider whether swelling is really so bad. You watch a farmer pay for a few leeches with a cracked coin and a promise to bring eggs next week. Medieval remedies travel easily between skill guesswork, prayer and desperation. A poultice of herbs may soothe, a charm may comfort, a leech may sometimes help, sometimes not. Even now it is hard to tell in the stories people keep where medicine ends and hope begins. Near the shrine, a grey-haired pilgrim speaks of a house where 3 shoes were hidden above a doorway after twin infants sickened. A woman buying salt says her grandmother placed a black hen's egg under the hearthstone during a hard winter, then never admitted whether she believed in it. A cooper says he once found a bottle full of pins beneath a tavern threshold, and that business improved after it was put back exactly where it had been. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether returning a charm restores protection, or merely prevents the blame from landing on the person who moved it. You begin to understand the walls better. They are not only built by masons, they are finished by fear, touched by habit, and quietly furnished with whatever small objects people trust when official blessings feel too far away. A castle chapel may hold bones in linen. A kitchen may hide a cat above the hearth. A gatehouse may keep bottles where strangers pass. A poor cottage, too, may have its shoe in the thatch, its pin in the lintel, its rowan twig tied over the cowshed. The porter buys a packet of rosemary and rue. He claims it is for the smell, though he tucks it carefully inside his cloak. You buy nothing at first, then choose a small iron ring, plain and dark, worn smooth by many hands. The peddler says it is good against bad dreams. The porter says it is good against losing a penny, since now you no longer have it. Both may be true. The market bell rings near the gate, thin and bright. People begin to shift toward the castle door, carrying goods for the kitchens. Turnips, onions, smoked fish, sacks of oats, and a covered basket that clucks in distress. The little dog appears from nowhere, wet-footed and cheerful, perhaps having made several profitable friendships near the fish stall. You turn back toward the gate with the crowd. Behind you the market continues its slow murmur of trade remedies, gossip and weather. Ahead the castle waits its dark walls shining after rain, and now they seem less silent than crowded, as if every stone knows the weight of some tucked-away charm, some hidden fear, some small human hope sealed against winter. You pass back beneath the gate with the market crowd carrying the small iron ring in your pouch, and the smell of wet earth on your cloak. Behind you, the peddlers continue calling their wares in soft winter voices, and ahead the castle yard receives everyone with mud smoke and the familiar clatter of work. The cook's boys hurry past with turnips and onions. A groom leads a horse carefully around the deepest ruts. The little dog, having acquired a fishtail from some generous or careless soul, trots beside you as if returning victorious from a crusade. The porter pauses near the covered passage and looks toward the rear of the keep, where a low stone building crouches against the inner wall. Its door is thick oak, darkened by damp, with 2 iron straps across it, and a small shutter set high under the eaves. A pair of servants carry sacks through the entrance, their shoulders bent beneath the weight. Winter storehouse, the porter says. If folk hide fear anywhere, they hide it near food. You follow him across the yard. The air grows colder away from the kitchens. Here the smells shift from smoke and broth to grain dust. Old apples, salted meat wool sacks, damp barrels and dried herbs. The storehouse keeper, a thin woman named Alice with a ring of keys nearly as serious as the porter's, stands inside the doorway making marks on a tally stick. She counts every sack as it enters, frowns at one that seems light, and gives the carrier a look so sharp it could slice bacon. Medieval winter is not a season so much as a long negotiation with hunger. Every onion matters. Every measure of oats, every side of salted pork, every wheel of cheese wrapped in cloth, every barrel of ale, every basket of apples buried in straw. A feast in the hall may seem generous, but behind it stands this chilly room of counting, guarding, drying, salting, smoking, and hoping that mice-mould thieves and bad weather do not eat first. Alice lets you enter after the porter murmurs something to her. "Touch nothing," she says. The porter nods. "She says that to bishops too. I say it especially to bishops," Alice replies. They bless with one hand and sample with the other. The storehouse is dim, lit by a few narrow slits, and one lantern hanging from a beam. Shelves line the walls. Sacks of grain are stacked on pallets to keep them from the damp floor. Bundles of herbs hang upside down from rafters. Thyme sage, mint, tansy rue, and yarrow. Their scents dry and faded, but still sharp when the air moves. Cheeses sit beneath cloth. Crocks of fat are sealed with wax. Smoked fish hang in rows stiff and silver brown. In one corner, apples nest in straw like small red-brown moons. Alice leads you toward the grain bins. Mice have been at the lower sack, she says. "And something knocked the herb bundles down last night," Rat asks the porter. "Perhaps." The little dog lifts his head at the word, then remembers he's not brave indoors unless food is involved. Near the largest grain bin, Master Odo is already crouched by the wall, examining a loose stone at floor level. You had not seen him leave the hall, but masons seem to appear wherever walls misbehave like saints of unpleasant surprises. He has cleared away a little drift of chaff and dust. Behind the loose stone is a shallow pocket. Alice folds her arms. If there is another dead cat, I am leaving. Odo reaches in and draws out not a cat but a small animal skull yellowed with age. Its teeth are sharp and delicate. Perhaps a weasel, perhaps a stoat, perhaps a creature whose name changes from village to village depending on who lost chickens to it. The porter bends closer. Grain guard. Some swear the skull of a hunting animal hidden near grain frightens mice and rats away, or lends the storehouse a watcher that never sleeps. Others say such skulls are placed there to honour the creature's skill, turning its hunger toward protection. No one can quite agree whether the dead hunter guards the food, warns the vermin, or merely reminds the household that every full bin depends on many small wars in the dark. Alice takes the skull without fear, only care. "There was one in my mother's dairy," she says, "behind the butter shelf. Did it work, you ask, though by now you know the shape of the answer." She looks over the sacks. We had butter. Odo finds more in the pocket, 2 bent coins black with age. a twist of red thread, a packet of dried leaves, and 3 small bones tied together with a cord so old it nearly crumbles. The coins have been folded hard enough that no merchant would accept them. Martin the clerk, arriving with a tablet in hand, lets out a soft sound of distress at the mistreatment of money. Bent coins are offerings, Alice says. Not spending. To whom, Martin asks. She shrugs. To whatever keeps the bin full. The monk who has followed with the inevitability of damp in stone clears his throat from the doorway. Gratitude belongs to God, and storage belongs to me, says Alice, so I shall be grateful in several directions. Even the porter looks impressed. The packet of leaves releases a bitter smell when Odo opens it. Rue, perhaps. Yarrow. Maybe wormwood. Herbs against pests, sickness, ill-wishing, and the general insult of winter. In many households, herbs are hung not only for flavour or medicine, but also for their manners with unseen trouble. Rue is bitter enough, people say, to discourage wicked things. Yarrow staunches blood and strengthens charms. Wormwood drives out worms or dreams or guests who dislike the smell. Even now it is hard to tell whether these bundles were remedy, superstition, housekeeping, or all 3 braided together. You look around the storehouse and feel the quiet pressure of survival. The hall is where people talk, boast, warm themselves, and trade stories. The chapel is where they kneel. The gatehouse is where they watch strangers. But this room holds the winter itself in sacks and barrels. If grain spoils here, the whole castle feels it. If rats come, hunger follows on little feet. If mould blooms, pottage thins. Suddenly the animals scull the bent coins, the bitter herbs, and the red thread no longer seem strange. They seem like whispered insurance. Alice returns the skull to a clean cloth and sets it on a shelf while Odo clears the pocket. He finds scratch marks around the stone, old but deliberate. Perhaps someone opened it once each autumn to refresh the charm. Perhaps the wall was sealed after a bad harvest. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such storehouse offerings are older than the castle itself, carried forward from field customs and barn rites into stone buildings that only pretend to be above peasant fear. Outside the market, goods continue arriving. A boy drops a sack of oats and gets scolded so thoroughly you almost pity the oats. The little dog noses toward a basket of smoked fish and is redirected by Alice with one look. No spell charm or saint's relic has ever worked faster. The porter touches the rusted little key in his pouch, then the iron ring you bought from the market peddler. A wall keeps out men, he says quietly. A storehouse keeps out winter. Harder work. You stand among the sacks and herbs while pale light slips through the high shutter. Dust turns slowly in the lantern glow. The castle above you creaks, breathes, eats, prays, gossips and worries. Here in the storehouse beneath all that life, the old charms lie close to the grain, guarding not glory, not treasure, but tomorrow's bread. The day bends toward evening while the castle keeps working around its unearthed secrets. The storehouse pocket is covered with clean cloth, the animal skull rests on Alice's shelf, and the bent coins lie beside Martin's tablet, while he argues softly with himself over whether an offering should be entered into an account if it can no longer be spent. Outside, the last market carts creak away through mud. The fishwife's stall folds into a bundle of wet straw and baskets. A farmer leads the disappointed goat home, and the goat looks back at the castle with the expression of a creature who has judged civilization and found it wanting. You return to the hall with the porter as the light thins. Smoke rises from the hearth in slow blue layers. Servants set out benches for the evening meal. The old rush woman scatters another handful of rosemary near the doorway, muttering that fresh green things soothe the room after too much stone has been disturbed. No one can quite agree whether rosemary comforts the living, warns the dead, or merely makes damp rushes smell less like yesterday's boots, but tonight no one objects to it. Master Odo is waiting near the marked wall by the hall entrance, the first place the porter showed you on your arrival. You had almost forgotten that chalk cross, though the wall has not. It waits beside the doorway plain as ever patched in several ages of stone. Beside Odo stand the chaplain, Martin, the clerk, the suspicious monk Alice from the storehouse, and the head cook who claims she has come only to ensure no dust reaches supper. This is plainly untrue, but in a castle all curiosity wears an apron if it can. The Vespers bell begins in the chapel, one low note, then another deep and warm through the stone. Evening prayer moves through the household. A few servants cross themselves. A guard bows his head. The little dog sitting on your boot yawns directly into sacred time. Odo kneels and studies the wall. This section is larger than the others, he says. Not a pocket, a sealed face. The porter lifts the lantern. Its light slides over the mortar joints, revealing a rectangle hidden among ordinary stones. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Someone long ago had cut, fitted, filled and disguised this place with patience. Not a hurried patch, not a builder's accident, a deliberate closing. The monk's fingers tighten around his sleeve. It may be structural. Odo gives him a look dry enough to preserve fish. Then pray for my judgment. The chaplain murmurs that prayer is never wasted. The head cook mutters that neither is a good wedge, and Odo seems to agree more with the cook. He begins at the top joint, tapping gently, working the old mortar loose. Dust falls like grey flour. The porter holds the lantern steady. You stand close enough to smell lime damp wool wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of beeswax from the chapel candles still clinging to the chaplain's robe. The bell continues softer now, each note folding itself into the patient sound of metal on stone. The first stone comes out, then the second. Behind them is not empty darkness, but another layer packed straw, clay and scraps of cloth pressed together as if to cushion whatever lies within. Odo pauses. He reaches in and pulls free a strip of linen stiff with age, then a bundle of straw, then a small wooden peg, then carefully a rusted knife blade without a handle. Martin leans forward. A tool or a charm, says Alice. Or a poor knife, says the porter. Many things begin nobly and end as rubbish. More stones loosen. The opening widens. Inside, objects appear in layers, each tucked against the next with strange care. A broken spindle, a bent horseshoe, 3 nails tied with thread, a scrap of parchment folded so many times it has become almost square, a child's wooden top split down one side, a tiny clay bird with one wing missing, a strip of blue wool, a lump of blackened wax impressed with a seal too blurred to read. The hall has quieted behind you. Even those pretending to arrange supper have slowed. The household gathers at a respectful distance, drawn by the sight of ordinary things becoming powerful simply because they have waited in darkness. Some swear that iron nails and horseshoes protect doorways because iron resists enchantment. Others say a spindle guards women's work, a child's toy guards children. Blue wool turns aside the evil eye, and sealed, wax holds a promise in place. Even now it is hard to tell whether this collection was built as one grand charm or gathered over many years by many anxious hands, each person adding one small defence to the wall like another prayer in stone. The chaplain picks up the folded parchment only after Martin nods that it may survive opening. The clerk works it apart with breathless care. The writing inside is badly faded, not a full letter, more a cluster of words, names, perhaps a short prayer, perhaps a line asking protection from fire fever, hunger and false tongues. The monk studies it and says nothing, which may be the kindest thing he has done all day. Odo reaches deeper. His arm disappears into the cavity nearly to the elbow. When he draws back, he holds a small iron key. The porter stiffens. It is not the same as the rusted heart-bowed key from the mural passage, but it is close enough in size and age to make the air change. The bow is round the stem, narrow, the bit cut with delicate teeth. The porter takes it and lays it beside the other key from his pouch. They are like cousins from the same forgotten lockmaker. No one can quite agree whether keys in walls are meant to lock danger out, the porter says quietly, or keep a secret from leaving. Behind the keys at the very back of the sealed space, Odo finds the final thing. It is a small wooden box no longer than your hand, wrapped in brittle cloth and bound with thread. The wood has darkened, but the lid remains fitted. No lock. No mark except a shallow cross scratched on top, and beneath it 3 tiny circles like the ones in the mural passage. The chaplain blesses himself. The monk whispers that it should be opened in the chapel. The head cook says that if it contains more bones, she's retiring to a hut with honest chickens. The porter carries the box to the table beneath the nearest candle, and everyone follows as if pulled by one cord. Odo lifts the lid. Inside lies a curl of pale hair tied with red thread, a tiny bead of amber, and a narrow strip of parchment bearing only one word too faded for certainty. Martin reads it 3 times. The monk reads it twice. The chaplain reads it once and grows very still. Is it a name, you ask? Martin swallows. Perhaps. What name? He looks at the monk, then at the chaplain. It may say Alienor, or Amis, or Anima, soul. The word settles over the table. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the box holds a child's keepsake, a mourning charm, a prayer for someone hidden in the wall chamber, or a binding meant to protect the whole household by naming what had been lost. The hair is soft-looking, even now impossibly personal after so much iron, straw, clay, and stone. The amber bead catches the candlelight with a honey-coloured glow warm as a preserved drop of sunset. No one jokes, not even the porter. Outside, Vespers ends. The last bell note fades into the evening. Supper waits cooling slightly on its boards. The wall stands open, its layered hoard resting in cloth and candlelight tools, charms, scraps, iron, toy, wool, wax, keys, and the little box that refuses to explain itself. You look toward the hearth where smoke climbs into the rafters, and then toward the dark opening in the wall. The castle feels full, not of ghosts exactly, but of hands. Hands hiding, blessing, fearing, mending, remembering. Hands that place small things where a stone would keep them after names had worn thin. Odo covers the box gently. Enough for tonight, he says, and no one argues. Night returns as gently as a hand drawn over a candle flame. The castle has spent the day opening itself piece by piece, and now it seems tired of confession. The largest wall cavity remains covered with linen. The little wooden box rests near the chapel candle, watched by the chaplain, the monk, and Martin in turns, though none of them appears closer to certainty. Master Odo has set the loosened stones neatly on a plank, each one numbered in chalk, so the wall may one day be closed again with dignity. Medieval repair, you learn, is often half craft and half apology. Supper comes late. The pottage has thickened in the pot, the smoked fish has cooled at the edges, and the bread has gone firm enough to remind everyone that delay is the enemy of teeth. Still the hall receives the meal gratefully. Hunger softens mystery. Wooden cups are filled, trenchers are shared. The head cook watches each serving as if daring anyone to mention dustbones, cats, shoes, bottles, hidden stairs, or any other object that might interfere with appreciation. No one does. Even the porter eats quietly, which makes the meal feel almost ceremonial. You sit near the hearth where the little dog has settled against the warm stones with his fish-scented victory long forgotten. The fire is lower now, bright at the core and red along the edges, throwing slow light over faces, beams, rushes, and the patched wall by the doorway. The smell of rosemary rises when someone shifts their boots. Above soot-black rafters vanish into darkness. Somewhere beyond the shutters the yard lies cold beneath a glaze of frost, and farther still beyond the walls the monastery bell waits for its next hour. The objects found during the day have been gathered on a long table under cloth and candlelight. Not displayed like treasure, but arranged carefully because no one knows quite what else to do. The concealed shoes sit together, curved and worn their leather dark with age. The dried cat lies wrapped in sacking no longer above the hearth, but still close enough to the kitchen smoke that it seems in some strange way to remain on duty. The broken bottles rest beside their rusted pins and old hair. The chapel bones, now folded in clean linen, have been set apart with a small cross. The letters and the bent pilgrim badge lie near Martin's inkpot. The animal's skull from the storehouse faces the grain sacks as if eager to resume its watch. The two keys are side by side, not yet matched to any lock, and the little box with its pale curl of hair, amber bead and uncertain word waits at the centre of all. No one can quite agree whether such a gathering should be called a hoard, a charm, a warning, a memory, or merely the result of an old castle being pulled open after too many winters. The monk says little now. His earlier certainty has worn thin, not broken, but softened at the edges like wax near heat. He sits with his hands folded in his sleeves, looking at the objects with a troubled patience. The chaplain murmurs that some things are best prayed over before they're understood. The porter says understanding often arrives late and demands supper. This time even the chaplain allows the remark to pass. Around the hall the household settles into a quieter talk. Alice from the storehouse tells the old rush woman that the weasel skull will be returned near the grain once Odo has checked the wool. The old woman approves. Some swear a charm loses its way if moved too far from the place that taught it its work. Others say once a hidden thing is found, its labour is finished, and to bury it again is like asking an old servant to carry water after death. Even now it is hard to tell whether kindness belongs to people objects or the stories wrapped around both. Martin reads a line from one of the old scraps, his voice low enough that only those nearby hear. It records payment for lime straw, 2 boards of oak, and a day's labour after a hard winter long ago. No grand confession follows. No name leaps free. The old accounts remain stubbornly practical. Yet now, after all you've seen, even lime and straw feel tender. Someone bought them. Someone carried them. Someone sealed a wall, placed a shoe, tucked a charm, hid a letter, or closed a room while the castle breathed around them. The porter rolls the small rusted key between finger and thumb. Perhaps it belongs to nothing left standing, he says. Then why keep it, you ask? He looks toward the patched wall, toward the open places, toward the table of strange little survivals. Because things that open nothing may still remind a person not to lock every door too tightly. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the porter means the hidden chamber, the little box, or his own heart which seems safely mortared under several layers of sarcasm and ale. But his voice has gentleness in it, and the firelight makes the iron key glow red for a moment as if it still remembers the forge. Later, when the meal is cleared and the servants begin spreading bedding along the hall, you help carry the safer objects to a chest near the chapel passage. The shoes are wrapped again. The pilgrim badge is placed with the letters. The bottles are packed in straw. The little box is left for the chaplain until morning. No one wishes to hurry it back into darkness. The dried cat, after much debate, is returned to the kitchen but not to the chimney. The head cook declares that it has earned a shelf, which may be the nearest thing to sainthood available to a cat in this household. At last you return to the hearth. The hall is dimmer now. The castle seems less frightening than it did when you first passed beneath the gate, though, not because it has become simple. It has become familiar. Its creepiness has softened into closeness. The walls no longer feel like cold mouths waiting to speak. They feel like old hands cupped around fragile things, fear, hunger, prayer, debt, grief, luck, and the stubborn wish to survive another winter. You lie down beneath a wool blanket that smells of smoked lanolin and the many sleepers who have trusted it before you. The little dog presses against your ankle. The half-burned candle near the wall gutters, steadies, then gutters again. Outside, frost gathers on the stones. Inside, warmth remains. You close your eyes while the castle settles around you with tiny sounds, ash sighing wood, shrinking a distant footstep, a soft drip in some passage Odo has not yet inspected. Some swear that when a hidden thing is brought back into light, the house sleeps easier. Others say the walls miss what they have held. You do not know. You only feel the warmth of the hearth, the weight of the blanket, and the slow breathing of the hall as night folds itself gently over stone timber rushes and all the vanished hands that once left something behind. The fire lowers itself into a quiet red heart, and the castle for all its secrets becomes still. The benches are dark shapes along the wall. The rushes no longer whisper beneath passing feet. The last candle burns with a small golden bead of light, softening the edges of the stones that kept so many hidden things for so long. You rest without needing to solve them all. The shoes may keep their roads, the little box may keep its name, the bones may keep their prayers, the keys may keep their unopened doors. Outside, the winter air lies pale over the yard, over the gatehouse, over the road where your muddy footprints have already begun to fade. Beyond the walls, the river mist drifts low among the reeds, and the distant monastery bell holds its silence until morning. Nothing hurries, nothing asks more of you now. The castle breathes in its old slow way. Stone cools, ash settles, wool warms. Somewhere in the kitchen, herbs hang motionless from a beam. Somewhere near the storehouse, grain waits in the dark, guarded by wood iron and memory. The little dog sleeps deeply, twitching once, then resting again. And you may rest too. The night is no longer a thing outside the door. It is a blanket laid over tower, chapel, hall, and hearth. The strange objects in the walls have returned to quietness, and their fear has become only a faint old echo softened by time. You are safe beside the embers. You are warm beneath the wool. The long road has ended for tonight, and the medieval world fades gently into darkness, one bell, one breath, one dimming spark at a time.